The courtroom was packed that morning, buzzing with quiet murmurs as people shuffled into their seats. It was a typical day at the New York County Courthouse. Except for one detail, this hearing was expected to draw attention. Olivia Davenport, a socialite with a reputation for reckless behavior and an inflated sense of self, was due to stand before Judge Richard Calloway. Known for his unshakable demeanor and sharp intellect, Judge Calloway was respected throughout the legal community as a fair but no-nonsense arbiter of justice. Olivia arrived in her usual fashion, late and unapologetic. Draped in designer labels and oversized sunglasses, she sauntered into the room as though it were a red carpet event. Her lawyer, visibly uncomfortable, walked quickly behind her, attempting to minimize the scene. The courtroom, used to decorum, fell silent as eyes shifted toward her. She stopped in the middle of the aisle, seemingly oblivious to the people waiting for her to take a seat. With a dismissive wave, she motioned for her lawyer to move aside so she could set her bag down on the bench. Her entitlement radiated as she removed her sunglasses with exaggerated flair, glancing around as though this were all beneath her. Judge Calloway entered moments later, the air in the room changing instantly. The murmurs died down, replaced by a respectful hush. In his mid-50s, Calloway was an imposing figure with his tall frame and calm authority. His sharp eyes scanned the room briefly before settling into his chair. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Olivia hesitated, clearly irritated, before standing with a heavy sigh, her expression screaming, "Why am I even here?" Judge Calloway didn't react. He adjusted his glasses, opened the file before him, and began the proceedings. Olivia's case was a fairly straightforward one, a series of parking violations compounded by an incident of reckless driving that had endangered a pedestrian. But what could have been a routine hearing was about to take a dramatic turn thanks to Olivia's arrogance. As Judge Calloway started outlining the charges, Olivia's posture shifted. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and rolled her eyes, a blatant sign of disrespect that did not go unnoticed. But instead of addressing her behavior, Judge Calloway carried on with calm professionalism. His tone was measured, his words deliberate. It was as though he was daring her to continue her act. The tension in the room began to build, and even the most seasoned court regulars sat up a little straighter, sensing something brewing. But Olivia, oblivious to the storm she was inviting, had no intention of backing down. Olivia shifted in her seat, her irritation becoming more pronounced with every word Judge Calloway spoke. She began tapping her manicured nails against the wooden table, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering something urgently, but Olivia waved him off with a dismissive flick of her hand. The room, already tense, seemed to hold its breath. When Judge Calloway asked her to confirm her identity, she barely glanced up. "Yeah, that's me," she said, her tone laced with indifference. A collective murmur rippled through the room. Judge Calloway's expression remained calm, though his eyes lingered on Olivia for a moment longer than usual. "Miss Davenport," he began, his voice steady, "in this courtroom, we adhere to a certain level of decorum," twirling a strand of her dark brown hair between her fingers. "Sure thing, Your Honor," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Gasps echoed softly through the room. The court reporter paused briefly before continuing her transcription. Even Olivia's lawyer buried his face in his hands, visibly mortified. Judge Calloway, however, remained unflappable. "Miss Davenport," he said again, his voice firm but calm, "do you understand the charges brought against you today?" Olivia rolled her eyes again, this time audibly sighing. "Honestly, no. I mean, it's just some dumb parking tickets and what? Someone getting scared because I hit the gas too hard? This is a waste of time." The courtroom fell silent. All eyes were now on Judge Calloway, who carefully closed the folder in front of him. He removed his glasses, placing them deliberately on the bench. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had paused. "Miss Davenport," he said slowly, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight, "I would advise you to choose your words carefully from this point forward." The gravity of his tone caused even the most disinterested court spectators to sit up. But Olivia, still oblivious to the seriousness of the situation, simply shrugged. "What? It's true," she said, leaning forward this time. "It's not like I hurt anyone. This whole thing is ridiculous." But what Olivia failed to realize was that her words were no longer falling on deaf ears. Judge Calloway's silence spoke volumes, and the courtroom was about to witness a response they would never forget. Judge Calloway leaned back in his chair, his piercing gaze fixed on Olivia. The room remained silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. Even Olivia's lawyer, who had been shuffling papers nervously, stopped to glance at the judge. "You believe this is ridiculous, Miss Davenport?" Judge Calloway asked, his tone steady, almost conversational. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it was impossible to ignore. Olivia scoffed. "Yeah, I do. I mean, come on. It's not like I robbed a bank or something. This is just overkill." She waved her hand dismissively, as though brushing away an imaginary nuisance. Judge Calloway nodded slowly, folding his hands on the bench. "I see," he said. His calm demeanor only heightened the suspense, making the spectators lean in closer. "Let me clarify something for you, Miss Davenport. The charges against you include not only reckless driving but also endangering a pedestrian's life. The law does not measure accountability by the size of the crime, but by its impact. Do you understand that?" Olivia rolled her eyes yet again, muttering under her breath, Sure. Whatever you say." The whisper was soft, but it carried in the silence of the courtroom. The judge's face remained composed, but there was a shift, a slight narrowing of his eyes, a pause that signaled something was about to change. "Miss Davenport," Judge Calloway began, his voice still calm, "do you recall the incident from 2 weeks ago, the one that brought you here today?" Olivia shrugged, looking bored. "Some guy stepped off the curb. I honked. He moved. End of story." The judge raised his eyebrows. "End of story, you say?" "Yeah," she said, crossing her arms. "No harm, no foul." But Judge Calloway wasn't finished. He reached for a document on the bench, flipping through it with measured precision. Then he addressed the courtroom. "Let the record show," he said, his voice carrying authority, "that the pedestrian in question, Mr. James Morales, was a 67-year-old retired firefighter. He was crossing the street legally when Miss Davenport accelerated toward him, causing him to stumble and injure his wrist. He has since required medical attention and continues to experience pain." Olivia's smirk faltered for the first time. She glanced at her lawyer, who whispered something to her, but she waved him off again. "I didn't hit him," she muttered. "He was fine." Judge Calloway's gaze remained fixed on her. "Does this sound like no harm, no foul to you, Miss Davenport?"